I'm sitting here with the historian, Miss Frederica Brown. And Miss Brown, I'm coming to ask you about the Goombay, specifically about the Goombay. Um, and one question I want to ask is, how did the Goombay get started?
Okay, the Goombay got started with one of the workers for the Caribbean cruise, and his name was Herd Hilbert, who was a white person, and he spoke to seven of us that lived in the Grove about having a Goombay, meaning that he can get Bahamian straw workers to come and sell their straws and have something like a festival down Grand Avenue. At the time we met, he was talking about Esther May and Bristol Park. At that time, it was the city of Miami Park. So we agreed with him because he said we didn't have to worry about any expenses of bringing over the Bahamian vendors. They would take the Caribbean cruise would take care of all of the expenses and the hotel room. And that's how Goombay got started.
So basically, what you're telling me is that Herb Hiller
Hmm.
was the one with the idea of creating the Goombay, or did he
Yes,
actually
he
do the
was
legwork of creating the Goombay?
he was the one with the idea,
Okay.
and he had spoken to several. At that time, we called him Big Al, and he had a restaurant. Big Al had a restaurant on Grand Avenue, and he asked him to get a few people to agree with him. And of course, Big Al did call a meeting with a few of us. There were seven of us that agreed to have the Goombay.
So the seven of y'all are those considered the original Goombay committee?
Yes, we were the original Goombay committee.
And do you know the first seven people that was a part of the original?
I can't remember everyone by name, but I do know that it was Bernice Hunt, who's deceased now, Geraldine Williams, who's deceased now, and one of the Andrew ladies who's deceased now, and it was a man from the Golden Gates. We call the Golden Gates area part of called Gables, where the black folks live. We call it the Golden Gate, and it was like I said, it was seven of us that met.
Right. And you were one of the seven
I
too?
was one of the seven.
So it's safe to say that you were the one of the original members of the Goombay committee.
Yes.
Who were the people that actually did the legwork? I want to just understand were the ones that actually made the Goombay happen from his idea. And I guess he called meetings or whatever, and with certain ones and everybody.
Well, after we met, the seven of us, and agreed with Mr. Hiller to have the Goombay, then there was various committees that were formulated. Mostly people of Bahamian descent were called to discuss and to make plans for having the Goombay. I was not on the leg work for having it or not on the committee at that time to make the final plans and the arrangements for having Goombay. I was just on the first.
Do you know who spearheaded the charge?
Okay, at that time we had the community action agent, and at that time, Pinky, her name was Ernestine Sands, and they spoke to her first because that was one of the community groups and organizations, and they got Pinky involved. They got Frankie role involved, and I guess they had their private discussions as to how they were going to make the plans before they went to the city.
Okay. And so once they went to the city will end up giving a permit so you can have. How did that go along? How
Okay,
did the process
I
work?
don't know. I don't know the background and the formation from the city request, but apparently whatever they did worked out because the city gave them the right and gave them permission to use Grand Avenue, which was not divided at the time. The street was ran right through.
Right.
So they brought in the vendors, which would be the Bahamians, and most of it was down on, I still say we called it Carver Park, but it's Esterman Bristol Park now.
Right.
Most of the vendors were there. Then after seeing that it was taken well, then they started saying we needed to spread out some more because there was not enough room to have all the vendors with their supplies and everything in that position in that spot. So what they did, they decided to let the vendors have booths. Pinky and her committee let the vendors have booths, and brought over their strawwares, and they were in a booth.
So it was basically, I'm just trying to get so the youth can understand how the Goombay got started, and I'm just trying to take it a little slow with you because I see you got a lot of information. So I'm just trying to slow it down so people can understand, how did the Goombay, again, we already established that Herb Hiller was, the guy that had the idea, but I'm just trying to understand, like it was Bahamians coming from over, Bahamas with the vendors, and they was actually throwing an event, and we was just and the Americans or whatever was just patronizing them.
Right.
Was that's how it started?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it started out with the Bahamian vendors, those people that sold straws in the Bahamas. Their market straws consist of baskets, hats, and what have you. Well, they each had a booth.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did, they arranged them on Grand Avenue,
Mm-hmm.
and they were selling their items,
Right.
the Bahamian
From Bahamas.
type, the Bahamas type items. And then they had a few people that were on the side that sold like food items, pigeon peas and rice. It was a Bahamian type thing, so they had Bahamian type food.
So basically, the Bahamians came from Bahamas with their, ingredients of
with
food,
their straws
and food, and basically wanted us to patronize their vendors.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the idea was to help them to make money also.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how did it grow into where, now the Bahamians, us Bahamians that's, decent, but how did it get away from the Bahamians actually being the vendors to now the Americans are the vendors?
Well, I can't answer that because I don't know how that was, but I do know they probably didn't have the capital or the money to bring over as many Bahamian vendors as they started out at first. As I said, Mr. Hillard came with the idea and said, don't worry about the vendors, they will be taken care of. And that's what happened. Now, when it became handled by someone else, I don't know how they supported the vendors, but they didn't have as many as they did the first time. Only a few of them came because it was very competitive with the Bahamians who were originated here from Miami and those that were coming from the Bahamas. It was sort of like competition work.
Right. So then eventually the ones that were here living in Miami, eventually they moved out the ones that were just coming over from Bahamas.
I don't know if they moved them out. I can't say that, but I think it had a lot to do with capital money for housing for the vendors that were coming from the Bahamas, what have you. But I had two cousins that come over the first couple of years, and after they left, I asked what happened, why they didn't come back. They said that they had to furnish their own place of living. So I think it might have been that. I don't know.
Right. But eventually it got down to where, now it became just more, I guess Americanized, right. The Bahamians stopped coming
Americanized after observing how the first group of people went. Then more Americans, and most of them Bahamian descent, like I am, joined in having their own booths. And that's how it
eventually wiped out
They wiped out
the Bahamians coming from over from Bahamas.
Bahamas, yes.
Okay. So how did William Rowe eventually come along with? Because there's some reports that I've seen, through Google and through research that Billy Rowe had something to do with starting the Goombay. How did his involvement?
Billy Rowe did not start the Goombay. He didn't even come to the first meeting that we had. Now, as time went on, he did become one of the planners for the Goombay. I imagine because he's of Bahamian descent, they went to him, and at that time, he was doing citizen work in the community. But he did not start Goombay, although he might have gotten credit for it, but he did not start the Goombay that I know of that started in Coconut Grove. But I thought that was a big event for the younger people that probably would not have gotten the opportunity to travel to the Bahamas. They saw that the Bahamians that came over with their wares were people that made straws. Some of them were doing their straw work right there on the job, making their straws. And they just saw that relationship brought most descendants that live here in the Grove, whose relatives were from the Bahamas. They brought them together, and it brought back a different relationship in the Grove because after the Goombay, we got to know who's who and what's what. And
so basically, you saying
so our history. When I say our history, I'm talking about Bahamian. Bahamian history was exposed through the Goombay.
it had to be some disconnect between the American descent Bahamians and the Bahamians that still was living in Bahamas. So that kind of the Goombay repaired those relationships, is what you saying?
Yes, what I'm trying to say. The Goombay repaired got those of us, when I say those of us, Bahamian descent, got us to realize that we had a treasure in our handiwork that we did. And it was mostly straw work. But these people exposed how they did that, because some of them would do it right there sitting down waiting for sales. And I think those of us that are decent saw the work that they were doing and was very well pleased with that type of work. We don't see that anymore. Younger generation, unfortunately, don't know anything about the straw works and how it got started and what happened.
Can you explain a little bit of the straw work for those that don't know? What do you mean by the straw work? And
well, what I'm talking about, they use the leaves from coconut trees and palmetto trees, and what they did, they knitted them together to make baskets. They also knitted them together to make various things from straw: hats, baskets, and mats. Many things that you can say they did.
And so
it
what
was very artistic because it was original. That was their own ideas.
So basically what you're saying, the Bahamians brought to America at the time of the Goombay the idea of straw hats and the idea of straw mats and straw, everything done hand
things
handmade
made from straw.
Yes.
Yeah, made from straw.
Okay.
Well, at this time, as I said, Coconut Grove was a very familiar place for activities of that, like Goombay and what have you. But it also exposed our younger people to various culture-like things. And
Right.
I'm saying culture-like things that happen in the Bahamas and the West Indies, and things that they probably wouldn't have seen. This type of atmosphere brought that activity over here so they can be familiar with the straw works and what was made from straw. And I really think that was good for the younger people in the Coconut Grove area.
So based on what you're saying and from my understanding, it the Bahamians brought like a trade over here from like a straw, selling
I
hats.
wouldn't say they brought a trade over here. What I would say is they exposed the trade by letting the people in the grove see the handiwork and the many things, items that you can make out of straw.
Right. Once they was exposed to that trade, they end up starting selling hats and stuff and making money based on
Yes,
that.
they did. And then this gave them an opportunity when some of them went to the Bahamas to go to the straw market because they knew what it was all about
Right.
after having that exposure from the Goombay.
Okay.
It brought people together.